How you doing?
I'm good, you?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm looking forward to today's one.
Yeah, me too. What are you talking about today?
I think it's about relationships, isn't it?
Relationships. Well, first of all, as well, we just got to say it's just the two of us today.
Yeah.
Myself and Michael, because Stuart is having a well-deserved break over Christmas, so it's just the two of us. But you got the two best-looking ones.
100%. Well, I'm obviously number one. Put it to the vote.
Put it to a vote. Yeah. Anyway, Michael. So relationships.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, obviously a huge subject, and one that I think we all question from time to time, isn't it?
I agree.
I'm in my mid-50s now. How many people do I know that have gone through breakups, divorce? Pretty much 90%, myself included.
Yep.
What is it? I mean, you've been through a divorce as well.
Of course.
And, relationships, you've had ups and downs over the years. What is it, do you think, that we as men often struggle with regards to relationships?
Are we talking about relationships with females?
Yeah.
Relationships is a very definitive thing, right?
No, absolutely. So, I think it's more really the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. What do you think the biggest challenges are there?
I would say the biggest challenge, I would say, is setting your values and your boundaries out from the very beginning. So let's look at it from an age point of view. And I think this is the key. You said you're in your mid-50s. I'm in my mid-40s. If you look back at it from when you're in your 20s,
yep.
your teenager in your 20s,
yep.
you're embarking on that journey of self-discovery. You're embarking on a relationship with individuals and girls, and you're trying to find your values, you're trying to find your boundaries, and
also trying to sow your wild oats as well.
100%.
What you do in your 20s.
Of course you are, because you're either that person where you think, right. I mean, I know individuals that have done both sides of the spectrum. Someone that's been with someone since they were 16 years old.
Yep.
And they're now 40s, 50s, and they're still with that individual.
Yep.
I think that's commendable.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sure it's been ups and downs and so on, but you found that person and you're with them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like us, or how I've been, you want to go and do that and get the experiences and go and enjoy yourself. But I think on that note, with values and boundaries, I think it comes down to what society perceives that you need to go and do.
I do think you're right. I think there is very much a societal pressure. Like, we got. I can speak from my own experience. Right, when I was in my 20s, I didn't take life too seriously. I worked hard. I played hard. Earned a decent wage. Didn't have kids. Didn't really have too much responsibility. So pretty much my thing was looking forward to the weekends.
Yes.
And going out and finding girls and chatting them up and doing that sort of thing. But there was always a part of me that was like, I can't do this for too much longer. And for me, my magic number was 30. Once I'm 30, I've got to grow up.
I thought you meant 30 women.
No,
you surpassed that.
One weekend, baby. No, but in all seriousness, once I hit the age of 30, it was like, right, okay, I've got to calm down. And I think that I created this sort of belief in myself. Yes. And interestingly, that's when I got married. Not because I didn't love the person that I got married to, but also because there was I felt that there was this ticking time bomb. Yes. And I look back and I think that's bloody ridiculous. And I actually honestly thought that my life was like somewhat over by the age of 30.
Okay.
That I had to go into this sensible way of being, and I did. I actually changed, I think, my persona quite a bit, from sort of being a bit wild, bit not really giving a shit about anything, to sort of becoming a responsible adult. Sure. But it was all a bit of an illusion.
Of course.
So yeah, literally within that, I met my ex-wife and we got together, but I very much created a watered down version of myself, and the weekends stopped being so much about going out and doing what I was doing, but much more about actually doing the house up, buying a place together, yes. And doing all of this. And going back to your point about the societal thing, that was it. Yes. Society's told me I need to grow up now and yes. do these things and be responsible.
And I think the biggest thing, going back to that, and obviously moving to as you get older, I think your values change, as you said, because it's society. If you look at it based upon now, and I've thought about this quite a lot as I am here now, where you can't get good at anything. They say, and this sounds really sort of, I suppose, quite bad, but I put it into an analogy, is that you become proficient in something after 10,000 hours.
Yes.
Golf, work.
Yeah, mastery,
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But when you're at the very, very beginning, we are at an age, and people watching this are at an age where that society thing and where we grew up, and I was more or less sort of the tail end of it, maybe in the 40s. We grew up where our parents and grandparents, I mean, my grandparents were from the East End of London. My granddad went out to work. My grandmother went to classes. My nan was at home looking after the kids, and that was society. My mother and father went through the same process.
Yeah.
I grew up believing that's the right process we need to go and do.
Me too.
And and the problem is now is that there's a lot of distractions. So if you look at, so what I mean by that is we get to this age now where we can either keep that in mind, but we're actually dinosaurs.
Yeah.
We're actually behind it. And our values and boundaries and our wants and needs and clarity of expectations and things, unfortunately, have changed due to environment.
Yep.
Where you had these individuals, my nan and granddad, unfortunately my granddad died in 81, but they were together from 14, 15 years old. And my granddad was, I think it was in his 60s, 70s, 80s, and my nan unfortunately died when she was 95, and she never met anyone after that. Had my granddad not died, like most grandparents,
they'll stay together.
They'll stay together till the end because it was the done thing to do. Whereas if you fast forward now to our kids, our children, people in their teens and 20s, a woman doesn't need a man anymore to provide for them because there's a lot more out there. Whereas previously, a man is classed as the
breadwinner.
Yeah. It's the hunter-gatherer.
The social norm of the time, it's sort of been dragged, into that.
Absolutely.
I think that this is, one of those things that, going back to what you said, when you're younger, you don't really know what you're about.
Agreed.
You're probably not going to be very clear on your purpose. Some people are, but generally you're just finding your way through and working out what you like, what you don't like, and so on. But you get to a point where you start to understand yourself a lot better. But perhaps the question we don't ask ourselves is, what are my expectations from a relationship?
Agreed.
And I think that when I've spoken to people I know that have gone through breakups, are going through breakups, whether they're married or whether they're just in a relationship, a lot of the issues come from a lack of clarity around what each other's expectations are. There's these sort of unsaid expectations that people have of each other, and I've certainly been within that myself. It's what do I really want? Mm-hmm. What am I prepared to do? And it goes back to what you're saying about the values.
Yes.
How clear are we on our own values? Because I don't think many of us are. And that's work that I've done recently.
Yeah.
And what that does, once you understand what your values are, what when you're really clear about it, if you're with someone that doesn't share something very similar, then it's a recipe for disaster.
Or they change, right? So when you're saying that, I'm just thinking of this. So let's say when you meet someone back before, not now, but previously, life changes. Kids, work, environment, whatever it may be. So let me ask this question. When you were younger, prior to obviously where you are now, what was the most important thing to you in a relationship?
Sex.
Nailed on, 100 million%.
Just being completely honest.
No,
sex.
That was where I was going with, right? So my expectation at those stages with a female isn't about what I think now, communication, respect for each other. It's more of a case of, without being coy or rude, am I going to have sex every night?
Yeah.
And then, so if you meet someone, so I'm using this as an example, you meet someone, you build a picture, you put a persona on, maybe to attract that female, because that's what they want to hear, because of their background, because of their father. They say women go towards who their fathers are, or they actually go the polar opposite, right? So if you meet someone and they actually have lived a very wealthy or a privileged lifestyle, and you come from something different, or you're there, you try and create that because you want that person to be happy, right? Yeah. Which is all a facade at the end of the day, because work goes, you know, you might end up bankrupt, broke, or whatever it is, and you go, where do I go from here, right? But the expectation at a very early age, and I don't have these expectations anymore, which is actually a good thing. Do I expect sex every night? I'm 45, you're 50. Work gets in the way, tiredness. But when you meet someone, you have sex, you have kids, work gets in the way from the alpha male side of it, and also the female part of it, where you get home, you're knackered. You've got 2, 3, 4 kids, wherever it is, running around the house. You don't have the opportunity to go away. And then you say, right, let's go away for a weekend. You think, oh, I'd like to go for a dirty weekend. All you want to do really is sleep.
just switch off, unwind, relax.
The last thing that anyone really thinks of, I say from a female, I'm using this from past experience, the last thing a female ever wants is that whole rigmarole. Well, whereas we're sitting there going, look, we're away for a weekend, we've got no kids, you've got no excuse.
I think that's partly true, but again, I think it comes back to setting the expectations.
Agreed.
Like, so if you say, look, we've got no kids this weekend, let's go away, let's do that, you know, is there clarity about what you want from that weekend? Is there open communication to say, look, what I'd really like is I'd like some love, you know, a bit of loving, maybe. You know? And they might be going, no, all I want to do is I want to go in the spa, be pampered, and then go to bed and sit and
read a book.
Yeah, watch a chick flick and eat a box of chocolates.
Yes. Communication, that is.
It is totally that. So is the communication there to get those expectations? Now, you can imagine it, can't you? And I'm pretty sure I've been in this situation before. You know, you'll go, right, okay, let's go away. And she's thinking one thing and you're thinking something else. And what happens is you go away and you end up having a big fuck off row. Right? Because you know, your expectations haven't been met, and hers are, I just wanted to be left alone to do this, and you're just badgering me every 5 minutes.
100%.
Because you want to get your end away.
100%.
Yeah. So then what happens is you come back and you're like, right, okay, well, I've done that.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. I won't do that again. I won't waste my time and my money.
Yes.
You know, I'll go and watch a football match instead with me.
100%. and it's true, so true. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things of struggling is communication. And
communication's the heart of everything.
Of course it is. And going back to when you're younger, there is no communication. The only communication is the language of just raw, passionate sex and so on. You know, I mean, let's use it as an example. I know people alluding to this fact is that when you're younger, what the most attractive thing about a woman, and I'll put it on the table, is the physical attraction.
Yes, when you're younger, yeah.
It's the physical attraction. To me now, it's actually about the emotional and the mental and
oh, I'm going to say something to you that you're not going to like,
go
Michael.
On,
yeah,
okay.
This is what it's going to underpin you a little bit.
Go.
Right, brace yourself.
Go on.
It's all about the connection.
There you go.
Yeah, it's all about the connection.
100%.
And that, I think, is where so many relationships fall down, because it is that interaction between the masculine and the feminine that so many people don't get.
Yes.
And what the feminine wants, because we've all got feminine in us. I know yours is probably about 0.00001%.
I'd agree.
Yeah, but we've all got the masculine and feminine energy within us.
Yes.
But the feminine, you know, the dominant feminine wants connection.
Yes.
And they get the connection by having our full attention.
100%.
And when we don't give them, so if we're looking at our phone going, look, you said you wanted to come away, darling, for a weekend. Yeah. I'm away, but look, I've got to just see what the football results are.
I've got to get on the old betting apps.
Or I've got, you know, I've just got to call my mate about, you know, whatever, or there's this work thing to do. Yeah. You're not giving them your attention.
Agreed.
Your attention is elsewhere.
Yes.
So that connection part, if you really want these things to be successful, is to understand that is it. And I think, you know, we sort of had this conversation before. It's better to give, I feel, your woman half an hour of your focused attention than giving them 4 hours of, you know, not being present.
Agreed. And vice versa. I think it can't all be a one-way street. Absolutely. It has to be a 50-50. So I'm going to raise a question. We'll come back to this.
Yep.
But I'm going to raise a question. When should you walk away? Because you're saying all this and it's fantastic, right? I agree.
Okay.
when do you think, and we could maybe come back to that.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's a bit of a loop. So, but when do you walk away? You walk away from a relationship when it becomes intolerable.
Okay. Definition of intolerable?
If it feels like hard work constantly. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, because I think if it's become intolerable, so let's say together you've been together 5 years, yeah, and it started off good, but over the last sort of 6 months, you're just clashing over silly little things. Have you actually spoken to each other? Have you actually communicated? Have you actually got clear and said, look, this is what I want from this?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's that distinction between really understanding what it is that you need, and making sure that your needs are fulfilled, rather than getting clear on, getting stuck on what it is that you want. So if you're saying, look, darling, I expect sex with you every night, all right? And I expect you to cook me dinner, and I expect this, and I expect that. If you don't have that conversation and you're really clear about what your expectations are, and she's thinking the polar opposite of, actually, I would rather sleep with the dog than sleep with you. And you can make your own bloody dinner.
Yes.
Yeah. Then, until you've had that conversation and been clear about it, then you're just going to be like that, because I think that's what happens a lot. Is there's a lot of
readers.
Unsaid stuff.
Yes.
So when should you walk away? When you've exhausted every avenue of communication, first of all, and you realise that actually this person does not align with my values.
Okay, I agree with that, 1,000,000%. But what if you've got that far down the line, and because communication hasn't been off, and you haven't done it for X amount of time, and you try and sit down. And I think it's where couples therapy comes in, right? In that, and I've never done it. I was with someone that didn't believe in it. And it's why obviously we're now.
So you weren't aligned.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
1,000,000%. And then made that decision to go.
Yeah.
But the reality is when he's doing that, you're saying, sit down and have a communication. That's on the basis that an individual, either one of the partners, male or female, or the husband, wife, or wife, is now, husband, whatever.
Yep. Still masculine, feminine.
Oh, it still fucking blows my mind, but never mind. Right. So you're doing that, you want to go down lines of communication, but there is a barrier of one person for the line of communication to open it up. So let's put this in a scenario, right? Where you're with someone and you know that this isn't right. They know this isn't right. One of them, I say it's the bloke, turns around and says to the female or the wife, actually, do you know what? We need to have a conversation about this. And they go, I don't think there's anything wrong.
Yep.
You can only do that so many times. Would you say that's included in exhausting every line of communication? Not actually going down the road of communication, but actually...
Well, if you're so this comes back to, our saboteurs.
Yep.
Okay. And we all have them. We have all of these sabotaging behaviours, and you've done the PQ program, as have I.
For me, it's been what's the word? A revelation.
Yeah, it's been life changing for me and everyone else that I know that's been on the program, because you understand what your sabotaging behaviours and beliefs are.
Yes.
And when you actually identify that, you can see how much these things run your life. And one of those big saboteurs is avoidance.
I think that's quite low down at mine, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But for a lot of people, it's a very high one.
Sure.
And what does avoidance show up like? Is I don't want to have the conversation.
Yes.
Or it could be that I'm just going to go and have a drink instead. Or whatever it is. Find some sort of vice to avoid either looking at yourself, looking at the relationship, or whatever. So if you're saying, look, this isn't working, we need to talk about it, and the other party's saying, well, I think it's all okay, that's massive denial.
Of course.
Okay. And, there's a model that we use in coaching as well, which is, known as above and below the line, which is above the line, your life is, you take ownership, accountability, responsibility, and below the line is when we blame, we make excuses, and we live in denial.
So I understand that. Explain that a little bit more, how how that can be translated into for everyone watching.
Well,
how can it be translated into a relationship?
Okay, so by asking the question, I don't think something's right with our relationship. That's you taking ownership.
Yes.
And if the other person saying, well, I think we're all right, yeah, then they're in denial. So
Sure.
one of you's above the line and one of you's below the line.
Yeah.
Okay. So straight away you've got a lack of alignment.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? So that might be where you need an intervention to say to someone, look, okay, we could do some counselling here. Because I haven't gone through counselling myself, but I know people who have, and I know people that do it, and it's incredibly valuable and important because it gets both parties talking.
Yes.
And when people are in denial, it's because they're avoidant. You know, if I've got to really think that there's something wrong, that could open up a whole can of worms. So I'd rather just have a drink and avoid it.
Yes.
Yeah. You're not doing that because it's an unconscious thing. Consciously, yeah, you're trying to avoid that. The unconscious stuff is the unscripted stuff. It's almost like the computer program that's running our life via our saboteurs. So when we're doing things like, just going back to that ownership, accountability, responsibility model, okay, when we're taking ownership and we're saying, look, I'm telling you there's something that's wrong, but if you won't look at it, or if you're just going to keep blaming me every time there's something wrong in our relationship, there's only one way it's going to go.
Yeah, sure.
There's only one way, because both of you have to take ownership. You've both got to be above the line and looking at it. And it could be the other way around. It could be that, actually, what are you talking about? I'm a really good dad. I look after the kids. But she's saying, I don't have any time for her anymore.
Yeah,
is that true? Do I really have to look at that? And maybe you do. That's where you've got to take the ownership and go, actually, you know what? Yeah, maybe I'm not fulfilling her needs. Now, going back to your question, when do you walk away? It's when you've gone through all of that and you've looked at it, and if nothing's improving and your values aren't being aligned with, so that, you know, for me, one of my bigger values is respect.
Yes.
Okay? And it's not some sort of, respect. It's not that. It's, I'm respectful of others. I'm respectful of their time, and I expect to be treated the same way. So respect is just making sure that the person you're with is with you for the right reasons, and they respect that. And it's, you know, if say for example, they think that your role is, going back to what you were saying a little while ago, that you're the breadwinner, yeah, and you've got together on your expectation is, well, we both earn a decent job, we've both got a decent wage, and what we're going to do is we're going to buy a home together, and we will furnish and develop that home, and we'll bring kids, but we'll do that equally because we're both earning. And if you're thinking that but not saying it, but she's going, oh, okay, as soon as we're together and we've got married, I'm quitting work because I want kids. You know, I want to make the home nice, and then I want kids. If you haven't had that conversation, if you haven't got that level of awareness with each other, what's going to happen?
You start drifting.
Yeah, and the chances are, and I've seen this to some degree being in it, is you just start to become like more and more begrudging of that other person.
Agreed.
You know, and resentful.
Yes.
And that is toxic. That's when things become toxic, because you're just constantly going through the motions of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And it's all your own fault if you haven't sat down and had that conversation about expectations up front.
Okay, so I have two questions.
Yep.
The first one, from what you were just saying, and I'll go back to where you was. You said about respect. Respect, trust, 1,000,000%. One quick question. Do you think it's earned in a relationship, or do you think it's given?
Well, do you know what? It's a really interesting one, because I think when we talk about things like values, there's more to it than just the word. So if you think about it this way, right? Talk about trust. There's different levels of trust.
Sure.
So, and it's like honesty, you know. So I do a lot of work with companies. I go in and I talk to them about their values, and usually the one that comes up is integrity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does integrity actually mean? You know. So if I ask you what integrity means, and then I was to ask Stuart or someone else, or a man on the street or whatever, I'm going to get a different version each time.
Of course.
So you've got to really understand what the fabric of that value is. I'll give you an example. Honesty, right? You could say, I'm always honest. Now, honesty to one person could mean, I'm not going to steal that 50 quid that's lying over there.
Is it?
I'm not going to steal it.
Yeah.
Because I'm honest. The other one could be, well, I'm going to steal it, but if anyone asks me if I've stolen it, I'll be honest and tell them.
Yes.
That's how we can get...
It's subjective. It's
Absolutely.
not actually one...
So we have to be really clear to define what we mean by respect and what we mean by integrity and honesty and all of those other things. One of mine is responsibility, you know, and that is when I fuck up, okay, I might not see it straight away, but I'll always reflect and go, I could have done better there.
Yes.
That was down to me. I own it. I'll apologise. I'll do better next time.
See?
When people don't do that, if I'm in a relationship with someone who can't do that, who constantly, you know, wants to blame and deflect and be in denial, it ain't going to work.
No, 100%.
It's not going to work.
Totally agree. But it depends on, let's be honest, it depends on where you are, where your values and boundaries and your expectations are, right? If you're happy to live a life like that and actually get that and go, well, actually, do you know what? Cards on the table, I can deal with all that because I'm getting this, then you've only got yourself to blame. And I think, but going back to the respect and the trust thing, my personal feeling is in a relationship, and I never thought this when I'm younger, but especially now as I'm older, is that I think it's given as a default. So what I mean by that is, and I'm putting an analogy in now, it's like Monopoly, right? You start Monopoly, you don't start with zero, you start with X amount of money to get...
£200, I believe it is.
200, well, no, it's more than that. I think you get 200 quid for every time you go, but I think you get like £1,000.
Oh, 1,500 quid.
1,500 quid, right? So you've got a starting...
Shows how old Monopoly was, doesn't it?
Probably, what is it now? It's probably like, I don't know,
just about buy you a takeaway now.
Free Bitcoin or something now, do you know? Yeah. But I used to think it was earned. And I used to think that actually it wasn't me that had to earn the respect and the trust. It was the other person because of my mindset.
Yep.
I think differently now. I think that you have to give trust and respect mutually. So it's 50-50. This is lost. And I'll give you an example on this.
Well, I'm gonna change the 50-50 bit in a minute, but yeah.
Okay, fine. So I'll work this out. So 50-50, where we've got respect and trust, etc., etc. I will give you that respect and trust. It's yours to lose.
Yeah.
And I expect you to do exactly the same.
Yep.
But this comes on to the other point, the other question, because I think it comes back down to background. But I'll come on that in a second. And this is where everything goes wrong, in my personal opinion. So I've been in a relationship, and I have given that respect and the trust because that's what I expected back. And I've been burnt, and I've been massively burnt on that. And what I mean by that is I've given that respect and the trust over, and unfortunately, the individual, through a period of time, has reverted back to type, where maybe that person couldn't have actually handled that respect and trust that I give them, didn't know what to do with it, or actually, and this goes back onto the other point, the background actually states, well, you know what, I've never been this decision, I've fucked up all the time, so I'm going to revert back to that. So I am now, and I'm very, very conscious of it, of giving that over. However, I believe that I'm only ever going to vulnerability. That's not making myself vulnerable. I believe now that I've got to make myself vulnerable. I've got to put myself into that situation.
Yeah.
But going back to the background and self-awareness and everything else,
yeah.
I used to, before the PQ program, my self-awareness was I would fly off the handle and get stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
If something, because I was a controller. My saboteur was a controller.
Yep.
Why has that person done that? Why have they done that? Now, because of this, I've come back massively.
Yep.
So I think if you then do that, if you have the expectations and your values, and that person doesn't meet your values or needs or wants or whatever it is that we're discussing, to me, you said about having that line of communication. Hardest thing I've ever done is leave my ex-wife with my children.
Me too.
And she was, and I will say this now, she was the person that unfortunately with communication wasn't there. Background reverted to type, expected this, because you said something along the lines of, if someone expects to go to work, right, and I use this as an example, and this is the relationship I'm talking about, where, yes, I was very much the breadwinner. I want to go out and work because that's my meditation, that's where my happy space is being busy, as you well know. Mm-hmm. She gave up work to have the children, which is great. And do you know what? I actually thought, based upon our age, that was the relationship we were having. But then something changed. my values and my values and expectations didn't change, because I was happy going to work and going away and working. I set up my business in 2016. I was happy to work 24 hours a day because I knew I was doing it for a purpose. Because we had agreed through communication that that's what she was going to do and that's what I was going to go and do.
Yep.
Somewhere along the line, it didn't happen. Where she actually pushed back and fought back and said, well, actually, I don't want to keep asking you for work. I don't feel as if I'm a woman anymore. I have not my own independence. I'm relying upon you.
Yeah.
Never communicated it.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is right. I went on my own merry way and went off for months and working because I only know how to earn a living at the time one way.
Yeah.
That wasn't said that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why we was having arguments over something that to me had already been formalised.
Lack of communication. Well, look, it's like anything, you know, in a business sense. What I encourage people to do is be clear on your vision. You know, you go, right, what's your vision? And you know, you work it out and you go, this is where we are, and this is where we want to get to. We want to get to there for this reason, so get your why, okay? And then everyone gets excited and goes off and does it. But what happens after a few months is people start to forget what it is that they're aiming for, what that vision is. So it starts to drift. So my advice is always, once you've come up with your vision, you don't just do it once. You've got to regularly communicate it. Guys, remember why we're doing this? It's for this and it's for this. I don't think that's any different in a relationship. You know, if you're not communicating regularly, because it's basically you're staying on track because you're, like you say, you're going like that. Yeah. Well, if you're not having the communication, you're just going to carry on going like that rather than like that.
Do you know something? I agree. However, I've been told previously that everything in my life has been transactional. So when you're saying, and I agree, you know, and this is an epiphany for me, and you're hearing it first as in me as having an epiphany.
It's an epiphany moment, yeah.
Massively.
Loving it.
I was told many, many years ago that everything in my life is transactional. There's always a trade-off. So what I mean by that is with work, and I've always been very work. When you work for yourself and you're headstrong into that, and I've never made myself vulnerable, never put myself in the emotional state of it. Everything to me is transactional, 100%, and I agree.
Well, yeah, okay, I'm just going to unpack transactional a little bit. When you say transactional, what my view of that is that's often a win-lose situation.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, but you can become transactional in a win-win capacity as well.
Totally agree. But as I'm saying, where I was, it was transactional. It was like almost like, well, actually, do you know what? You've made me dinner, so now I'm going to do this.
Okay,
that's
right.
what I meant in a relationship, because it's a business thing, right? In business, you invoice this.
You scratch mine back, I'll scratch yours.
Exactly. I give you this service, you pay me this.
Yeah.
Right? And that's always been my life. It's very transactional. So, you know, this is what we're doing. I'll do this, you'll do that. It's a transactional thing. It's a zero-sum fee, win-lose. It has to balance itself out somewhere along the line. And someone said that to me, and I never actually really understood it until recently, where, you know what? In a relationship, and this is what I'm trying to get at, work and relationship, you alluded to the fact that they were not the same, but my interpretation was that in businesses, people do this and get to an end result. Yes, I've done that in relationships, but actually now, I don't see the business element side of it, same as a relationship. Does that make sense? Because someone in business wins and loses. Now, what I mean by wins and loses, I don't mean theoretic wins and loses. A service is given for time, and then a payment is made for it.
Yep.
The bank balance goes down, and that person loses time, but they gain that, and then that person. Do you understand what I mean?
Yep.
But in a relationship, and this is my brain is going mental. It's like literally, where now it's not transactional.
Yes.
I'm going to do something because I want to do it.
Yes.
You know, I've had my head blown. Where been out for dinner, and normally I'm the person paying for it all, because that's just my nature of my values and my standards, and I believe a bloke should actually look after the female and so on and so on. Went out for dinner.
That's your societal norm stuff again.
$1,000,000%.
Yeah.
And that's how I've lived.
Yeah, me too.
And I've had that completely blown out the water where the person I went out for dinner with has actually paid. My head fell off. In a great way, because I actually turned around and said, what are you doing? She went, well, I'm paying for dinner. I was like, no one's ever done that to me. That, to me, that's not a transactional thing. That's you doing stuff because you want to.
Yes.
And that, recently, has completely made my head.
Well, I was going.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was going to come back to what you said about the 50-50 thing.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think it's possible to have a relationship where you're constantly meeting 50-50.
Sure.
I think what you're really aiming at is like 60-40. Yeah.
Sure.
Because it's just going to flip. But if it's constantly you're giving 80, 90% and getting 10% back for a sustained period, it's not going to work.
Agreed.
All right. So that might be a transactional element to it. I don't know. You can sort of chew through that and think what you think. But what you need to have is a good balance, which could be 60-40 one way, but it will flip the other. But it's never going to be 50-50. It's just that's too transactional.
But it evens it out as 50-50
yeah,
with the difference of this, that and the other.
Maybe.
So do you think then that the way that we are and the way that we act is based upon past experiences, background, what we understand is right and wrong, because what I believe is right and what you believe is right align sometimes, but are different in...
Yeah.
And we have these conversations all the time, right?
I think it's always this, right? I think contextually,
yes,
I think we agree.
Yes.
It's the content that we don't always agree.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
And that's the the important distinction with this. And that's pretty much the essence of what we're talking about here anyway, because when we do our values, that should be the context. So if your value is respect, if it is responsibility, what does that actually mean? And that's where you've got to get clear. What I mean by being responsible is that, from time to time, I expect my partner to pick up the bill. Or if we go out or whatever it is, that there's not this expectation that you're going to do it. Yeah. Let's go back to you. Your expectation is I pick up the bill because I'm the man. That's where you come from. That's a belief system that you've got.
100%.
Yeah. Now, I'm wired the same way, but what actually happens with me is I go into the pleaser part. So one of my saboteurs is the pleaser. So I'm a people pleaser. So we'll do that. I don't really want to do it.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm doing it because I feel I should.
Yes.
Because I'm being the pleaser. Now that's the big difference. Yeah. Actually, there are times when I'm like, I really want to pay for this bill. Yeah, and other times I better do it because
sure.
Now, that's not balanced, but that's as much my problem as it is the other person, because I'm not saying, look, you know what, I've got the last, especially if you're not like in a deep relationship or you haven't sort of
Sure.
But if you're with someone and you've just met or whatever, if you're going to set an expectation, I always pick up the bill, then you're going to get what you've always got.
Yeah.
But if you say, look, I'm happy to pick this up this time, maybe you can get it next time. Yeah. And the other person goes, how dare you? I don't pick up the bill because that's not the way I've been brought up. Well, you know
where you stand.
You know where you stand. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But if you set up the expectation that I always get the bill, I always pay, then you're making a rod for your own back. But if your values are actually no, I think we should share. It's a bit like what you're saying, that this person's come in, and it probably, let's just check this with you. It probably there's part of you that's really pleased, and you go like, but there's also part of you going, okay, that sort of maybe questions my manhood a little bit. I've got him now.
Do you know what? Oh my God, what have you done to me?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Okay, do you know what? I'll answer that question because you've posed it.
Yeah.
And I never shy away from a question.
Yeah.
I would say that after the initial shock, it probably did.
Yeah.
For a split second.
Yeah.
But what it actually did is affirmed my change of arc of fire, in my words.
Okay. Yep.
It's changed my path.
Yeah.
Where I actually now, and I know what I want from a relationship. It's not what I need, I know what I want. I don't need to be in a relationship. I generally don't. I'm happy living on my own, doing what I want, seeing the kids, seeing my mates, doing all those things.
Me too. Yep.
I know what I want from a relationship, and this this goes on to the last question I'm thinking of, is are we actually really clear about what is important to us? So this goes, I'm going forward to go backwards. So are we clear? You need to be clear, because if you're not clear, fucking everything falls down, right? But what makes us clear? My answer to that would be, you know, you're saying about, using an example of people paying or respect. Do we have that mindset of this is what we want? Or do we actually think in a relationship, in a past relationship, I haven't got A, B, C, D. So in my next relationship, I want A, B, C, D filled in. So if you haven't got respect in a relationship, you then, not crave, that's probably the wrong word, you want respect. But if you've got respect in your past relationship, do you actually become complacent that already comes? Or do you start a new relationship afresh? Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, I think that
to make whole.
Well, that's the word, whole, okay? How often do people go into relationships because they expect the other person to complete them? Because if you do...
You'll be disappointed.
If you do, it's a recipe for disaster.
So you've got to be whole at the very start.
You've got to be, yeah. So for a relationship, for an ideal relationship to work, you've got to be whole and complete yourself. And be with someone else who's whole and complete.
Yes.
Otherwise, you create codependency.
Correct.
And codependency is always going to end up in
yes, 100%.
Yeah. Interdependency, something slightly different.
Yes.
You know, and that's okay.
Yes.
But if you are whole, so this is where I'm at in life now. So after marriage and business success and business failure and all of the things that I've experienced. I'm actually at a point, and it's probably taken me a bit longer than I thought, where I know who I am. I know my values. I know what I stand for. But more than anything else, I know I'm fine on my own. Yeah. I don't need to be with anyone.
Yeah.
I don't need anyone to complete me.
Yes.
And if I go into a relationship, a new relationship, and that person needs me to complete them, it's an out for me. It's a no.
Do you know what? It's amazing what you're saying, because I've been in that situation.
So have I.
And when someone turns around and says, I can't live without you, I need you in my life, I'm nothing without you, you complete me. Back when you're younger...
That's a huge red flag.
Fuck me, that's like... I can relate it to the military when you've got a range and the red flag's going.
Yeah.
But when you're younger, let's put it in perspective. When you're younger, you think, brilliant. That person, that's it, we're there.
It strokes your ego.
Massively.
Yeah, it strokes your ego.
But now, no, strokes your ego. This is where you have to be aware of your own self-awareness.
Yep.
Because if you are in a very, not vulnerable, but you're in a very, very bad place, and as you say, that person requires it, then you're back to, you haven't progressed from maybe being younger. Whereas if you know that your path, or you're a person that needs people around them because you're not happy with yourself, you're not happy with your life, you're not happy with where you are in life or whatever it is. Now, what I'm happy with and what you're happy with are probably the same. What other people are happy with. People might be happy just to be told to go and do this and go and do that.
Yep.
That's fine. If you're happy with that, don't start moaning when you go out with someone and start giving you orders.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, look, I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've got friends of mine that everyone can see that the relationship that they're in is a disaster, but they'll keep going through the motions hoping that something's going to change, because you can see that they've grown apart. And I think that's the thing, we go through life and we grow apart. And it's nobody's fault. It's what happened in my marriage. I haven't got a bad word to say about my ex-wife. She's a lovely woman, I still love her, but we just had different expectations and we've gone different paths. Yeah. What's kept us, together for probably longer than we should have done is our son.
Yes.
However,
as it does with everyone, right?
Absolutely. And then what you do is you make excuses. We can't do this because of the kids.
Yeah.
But actually, it's the worst thing that you can do. If you've really grown that far apart, and you can talk calmly about it. And I think that's a subject for another podcast as well. Is about actually how do you handle these things? If you're in a relationship and it ain't working anymore. What's the best way to go about it? Because I think what happens sometimes is people just hit the the destruct button and let the chaos begin. Because the amount of people I know that's gone through toxic divorces, toxic breakups, and there's no fucking winners with that apart from the lawyers.
100%.
And it can all be avoided if you can just take an adult stance and be above the line. Ownership, accountability, responsibility. Instead of blame, excuses, denial, you can save yourself a lot of pain.
I think you just talked my divorce. I think you just hit my. You put my divorce in a complete nutshell.
Well,
really,
I think that's most
honest.
people's divorces, in all honesty. But you because you're splitting up with someone, the chances are, and I'm going to ask you this question: do you still love your ex-wife?
Now, there's two definitions to that. Listen, I'm an ex-copper, so I'm going to have to answer this in a very strategic way. Yeah. Am I in love with her or love her?
No, not in love. Yeah, if you was in love, you'd probably still be there.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right, but do you still love her? Because I know I love my ex-wife, but I'm not in love with her.
Okay, do I love her? I spent a large portion of my time with her.
Yeah.
She's given me 2 beautiful children.
Yeah.
Do I wish her any harm? 100% no.
Yeah.
Is that the definition of loving someone?
Well, I don't know. You probably. I would never want to see anything bad happen to my ex-wife.
Of course, no, 1,000,000%.
And she's a brilliant mother, and I still got a lot of feelings for her, but I'm not in love. And me and her haven't been in love for some time. But that doesn't mean to say I think she still loves me. But that's the point. It's about if there's love there. Yeah, then there's no reason why you can't navigate an exit or your separation from a place of love rather than from a place of I'm gonna fuck that person up.
I'm going to tell you something now. I'm going to be very vulnerable here now.
Go for it.
And I'm going to.
That's what this is all about.
100%. Put it out there. I'm going to be 100% honest. It has not been. I would say it's probably been 4, 5, 6 months that I've actually understood my emotions. And you've seen that as well.
Yeah, well, it's been similar for me, probably a couple of years now.
100%. Where before that, when you talk about love, I don't know what love is, right? Wrong, let me rephrase it. I understand it now.
Yeah.
But previously, love to me, because of my background and the way I've been brought up, was buying stuff. It was money. It was, someone used
to... You know what that's called?
Go on.
Avoidance.
Okay.
That's avoidance.
Someone used to, but I never understood it because I was told at a very, very early age that showing emotion, showing that was a weakness.
Yes, yeah.
And I lived my life like that.
And that's very much a bloke thing.
100%. Yeah. And I was a typical bloke.
Yeah.
And someone said to me a while ago, not a while ago, probably a short time ago, but a while in my head because days go on. Do I think I've missed out on things by being that way?
And do you?
Ask me again in a year's time.
Okay, all right. Well, you heard it here first. I think that's pretty much a wrap for today anyway.
I think so. Okay, one last question.
Go for it.
To you now, and we're both sitting here in the positions we're in.
Yep.
Talking about relationships and knowing what was good and bad and all the rest of it. In about a minute, tell me what your ultimate relationship would be for you that suits your values, your needs, your wants, everything.
All right, I'm going to summarise. I'm going to summarise what I've said, right?
Yes.
First of all, for both of us to feel whole and complete in ourselves, right? That's most important.
Yep.
Secondly, to be really clear on what our values are. And early on in any new relationship is to have a conversation around expectations and boundaries.
Yep.
Because if you're not clear on your own boundaries, and they keep getting encroached, it's just going to cause lots of resentment. So, look, if you can live your life above the line, take ownership, accountability, responsibility, be clear on your values, if you can understand where your boundaries are and can communicate that and then regularly communicate when things don't go wrong.
Yes.
That's one other thing as well, is having the courageous conversations.
Yeah.
Not avoiding them. Just going, right, do you know what, darling? Something doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
Okay, this has happened. This is how I've interpreted it. Okay, can we just talk about that? And that, being able to bring up that sort of thing is important. So I think that's it in a nutshell, really, for me. And just understanding as well that we're always in a state of flux.
Yes.
I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. Certainly not the person I was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be different again in 10 years. So the person who I'm with is going to be on the same sort of journey.
Yeah.
So are we still aligned? And if we're not, if our values change or something changes about us, is to go,
communicate.
do you know what? We've had a great time, but we want different things out of life. It's time for us to go our separate ways.
And do you know what? 100%, that's exactly how I see it. I want a relationship. There's no neediness, it's whole, and you've hit the nail on the head. My biggest takeaway from this, really, children, is this. Strap in, listen in. If you're not happy in your relationship that you're currently in, get out of it. Go and find yourself someone that meets your values. Don't waste your time.
Yeah, don't hang on in there just for the sake of it, hoping that something's going to change, because it
100%.
bloody well won't.
Absolutely, because if you're battling or whatever it is, great. People
But communicate first.
But people always see that's where I'm going now. Just walk away. It makes you the best person in the world, I think personally. So you decide. Thanks, children.
Guys, Mike, thank you very much for today.
I've enjoyed today.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too. And we'll see you again soon for the next episode of Stuck as Fuck.